what's going on, what's true, what's not true, right? And I would say one of the things we have that in order for us to divine what is true and what isn't true, one of the things we have to be willing to do is look at our own prejudices, our own presuppositions, our own assumptions, the examined and the unexamined, the conscious and the unconscious, because otherwise we can't trust our interpretation of information, because we will have a tendency to skew information such that it supports our beliefs and presuppositions and things like that. Our world, I'll just call it worldview, as a kind of umbrella term for all those things.
That's the perfect term, because worldview is a network of presuppositions, everything that you've come across in your lifetime, essentially. And I would say into this category of self-evaluation and your own presuppositions would also be whatever sacred cows are in society ought to be examined pretty closely, because cognitive dissonance is, potentially within those and blinded from truth thereof.
Right. And I have commented before how that's what I see right now in the world is a very real and, I mean, quite literally an insanity that is overtaking large portions of the population. And I attribute it to that cognitive dissonance that you're talking about, because there's a great anxiety that comes along with cognitive dissonance, which, for those of you who aren't aware of the term, it's in general, it basically means that you hold a conscious belief about something, and events and your own actions and the actions of others are contradiction to those underlying, well, not only your conscious beliefs, but they're a contradiction to your principles. And let me back up and say your conscious beliefs are a contradiction to the underlying principles that you hold. And I'd say a great example that I've used many times in the past is like critical theories, right? Where people are mindlessly pushing racism in the name of quote unquote anti-racism. And there's cognitive dissonance there because it's clear that you're being a fucking racist. But because you're told that by saying these things and by doing these things, by acting this way, there is virtue in that, and you are an anti-racist. So there's that conscious belief that I'm a good person because I think all white people are racist, and I think all white people are bad, and I think we should completely destroy our entire history and all our institutions because they're all racist, right? And yet, down deep where your principles lie, these thoughts that you have, these words that you speak, the actions you see others taking are contrary to and in contradiction to your underlying principles, because you do believe in fairness and you do believe in not judging people by the color of their skin, because those are underlying principles. That contradiction creates a cognitive dissonance, and because they're ramping it up so hardcore right now in every aspect of our society and throughout all of our media, it's creating a high level of cognitive dissonance, which creates a high level of anxiety, and we're seeing people literally acting insane, clinically insane from all this.
I think it's the pinnacle of this. If an individual's true goal is the pursuit of truth, then it's an exercise really of identifying and then eliminating wherever those contradictions are, and having the intellectual honesty to just say, to surrender to truth, basically, without pride or prejudice or anything. I just,
right.
That's it. And in this whole, and I just jumped in here, so pardon me if I'm interrupting. You could smack me down.
No. This is an open conversation. Please, I'm loving your contribution.
Sure. In this time where a lot of what is filling up many of these chats and everything is about, what's going on with government and political parties, and where different actors are stoking flames to pit the population against itself and all of that.
Right.
Some of those sacred cows worth analyzing are the nature of government and the foundations of government, where many folks think that the answer is some sort of restoration or return to, say, a constitutional republic, and that whole type of thing. And that's, on its face, on the surface, that seems fine. But if you really go back and analyze that with history, with contemporary people of that era, and what was happening, where we typically hear about and were raised in most of the literature and things that you can find is very pro constitutional republic, pro federalist, we can say, then your whole thought process is going to be skewed towards that particular bent, that particular angle. And it doesn't do any justice in the pursuit of truth, if that's really the goal, to ignore what the opposition said at that time. And I'm not talking about Great Britain during the revolutionary period, but right after that, what were the anti-federalists saying about these things? And is a return or restoration of the federal system as it was established via the Constitution, is that even a worthy thing to pursue? And there's a lot of history and the reality that we face, that history, those historical figures warned against, we now are living. And so a restoration in and of itself, I believe, is not enough, because that is one of the sacred cows, and there is a massive cognitive dissonance as it relates to that.
Right.
Massive.
And I would say, that an excellent counterpoint to that is the actual flaws that are evident in our original constitutional republic, because that original constitutional republic has led us here.
And it was warned, and it was specifically warned against
communist takeover, and the banking systems control the country, our media, and really the world. And this was all the things that, the founding fathers warned against, and yet it's our system that has allowed these things to perpetuate.
Well, and beyond that, that's a very, very lengthy conversation to have, which would be fantastic to have it, because it's very educational. But there's other things that people don't really think about beyond what you just said. They don't think about even the proportionality of the population at the time that was established versus today, the population density, as it were. And when certain people that were also founders, okay, they were the founding era, forefathers is probably more of an appropriate term, but there were people of that day who were also revolutionary heroes and such, who warned about these things. And this was when the population was less than 5 million people, okay?
Right.
And they warned about what the central government would become, and that they were essentially creating something that was going to be a worse usurpation of individual liberty than the tyrant king they just rid themselves of, which is pretty strong language for people of the day. You know what I mean?
Right.
And now when you go from, let's just round up to 5 million people at that point in time to 330 plus whatever million that it is today, how much more does that resonate? And is that valid? How much more valid has it become, really, to today's world? And, the clear answer is it's exponentially worse than they warned that it would be. And so a simple restoration ignores the fact that it is an insufficient system, even as it was at the time, because it was really just, people talk about, when America became a corporation and all this kind of stuff, which is really, it's really irrelevant because go back way prior to that, 80 years before that, 70 years before that, and it was already a train wreck. Already a train wreck. People just skip over all that because it's not really taught much. You have to dig for it. And so it doesn't just miraculously, it is a hopeless endeavor to try and restore something that was broken 232 years ago, because we have now modern times, the massive population growth and density, and what was irrational then is wholly irrational now. It's like inconceivably absurd. And so any pursuit of truth and what do we do next needs to acknowledge those facts. They're not just opinions. They're not just, interpretations or whatever. And they're not shadow people making up conspiracy theories or anything. These are historical facts and our modern day reality. They're inseparable from reality or from truth. And so we have to consider that. Go ahead.
I think part of it is the way that the system has been presented to the people and how that's disincentivized them to take an active role in improving upon the system and iterating upon it, based on how things change over time.
But even in that time, that's what I'm saying, Harry, is that you can erase all of the years that preceded past that up until today. You can put yourself back in that era, and it was fairly irrational even at the time, except for a very small subset of people, very small group of people.
It was
not representative. Yes,
it was reactionary, and it was based on anything we do in the future is based on the past. So they were just trying to create a system based on their experience, So.
Well, there's more to it though than that. Again, I don't know what anybody's background is in terms of researching the history here and beyond the Federalist argument of things or the Federalist perspective, but there's a lot of material that's out there that gives you some insights into the debates that they had during the Constitutional Convention, the debates that they had at the ratifying conventions, all of these different things that paint quite a different picture than what we're raised to believe. And when you take that into consideration, and the most powerful and noteworthy figures of the time are the ones who basically won in the debate because of public opinion of the people, not because of what they were espousing, but because of who they were in everybody's eyes.
Exactly. That was kind of my point of it.
Yeah. And so, a lot of people will say, well, this is something created on this idea of we the people, and that's actually not true. It's factually untrue. The people were oblivious to it. It was less than 39 people who created this. 39. Okay, and it was in a secret convention, no less. Like it was, the people weren't even privy to the fact, and most of the delegates that went to the convention went there under the auspices or the understanding that they were merely going to debate and deliberate over necessary changes to the Articles of Confederation, because that was put together during the middle of the war and had proven to have many chinks in the armor or inefficiencies or inadequacies, rather, as it was, to that. But they didn't go there expecting to create some massive national central government that was going to rule over the continent, and
right. And you have to, let's look at the historical perspective and what the intentions were. So a constitutional republic, the people are the power. And that's why it was structured the way that it was. Now, that means also people have the power, people have the responsibility. Now, our very first presidential election was corrupted. Alexander Hamilton corrupted the very first election. Then he created the central bank when the country was 2 years old. In 1791, we got the first Bank of the United States and the beginning of foreign control and power over this nation. So it hadn't even gone 2 years.
That's right.
Before the bankers already had taken over, so to speak.
And who was the first Treasury Secretary? Alexander Hamilton.
Exactly.
And who was one of the primary writers of the Federalist? Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah, and he was the Washington administration.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
So when you say that the republic, the power lies with the people, that is true in theory, right? But I think that the difference is, and this can always be up for debate, is how can the people exercise the power that they're given in theory? How is it practically applied? The theory applied to action.
I would say the biggest. Now again, you can't separate power from responsibility. We have built a culture of victimization and of irresponsibility. We just want government to solve all our problems
Exactly.
and to give us all the shit we need. So there's absolutely no responsibility, which means there is no power. So before the people can exercise power, they must take responsibility.
Well, and there needs to be accountability.
We don't have that.
Right. There's no accountability of these so-called representatives.
So,
but Harry, if I could,
go ahead.
To your question, though, also add to that, I would say it is not possible. It will never happen. It will never happen. Not on the scale of a national government. And that's the primary thing here. The only way you could do this is at a lower level.
Two things to that. I think part of the reason why people don't do anything is they're paying the government a lot of money every year, and they think that by paying the government that they will do what they want them to do. You are paying people to invest your money in things that will extend your best interests, right? They're investors, dude. And we have we're not evaluating their ability to invest our money when we pick a candidate. We're evaluating their ability to sell us a narrative. And that's what really, I think, part is really important to consider.
Right, and you remember the model you're speaking about is upside down from a constitutional republic. The quote unquote federal government was never supposed to have any power over anything. The most power in the constitutional republic is the individual, then the county, then the state, then the federal government at the bottom of the pyramid. So that you talk about it needing to be on a smaller scale. That is the small scale. Your county can nullify anything and everything that comes out of the federal government.
Bingo.
But that's not known, and people have been focusing all their attention on the federal government as though it is what's got all the power. And they neglect their county government, they neglect their state level legislators, and so they're neglecting the most powerful aspects of government with regards to their personal lives and putting all the time, attention, and, like you said, money into these people who should have no influence and no power.
So how do we create more options? How do we create more options for people to exercise their power under the republic?
It's not that way. It's not like that. It's not creating options. It's a matter of massive nullification and education so that people understand where does government find the ability to do anything. And it truly is at the consent of the governed. And the only way it changes is when the mindset, the cognitive dissonance, the sacred cows, all of those things are out of the way so that people realize, I don't need this over me. We can do better. And they nullify all of those things. And it's not a matter of, because you're not just paying them and then they're using your money. It's actually being extorted from you. Okay?
So
it's not like a voluntary payment.
My point is, how do they decide on what to nullify, and how are the people involved in that process, right? Like, how are the people exercising their power in a way that actually affects change?
Well, at the county level, it's, depending on the structure of your county, a lot of counties have what they call commissioners, right? And those commissioners, like legislators, are going to pass the laws that govern your county. And they are all elected. Your sheriff is elected. The judges in your county are elected. So until you start holding those people accountable,
but you elect them and then they just you don't communicate with them after that. Like, there needs to be
that's the lack of accountability as well. Absolutely.
Communication all the
and
time.
showing up. Yeah, show up at those county commissioner meetings.
Well,
You
not
know,
just
and
that,
But
but their
isn't
county.
like showing up? Sorry, Jen, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, get involved in county boards. Um, I imagine in most places, as where I live, I've chaired many county boards where I have networked with specific commissioners and have been able to have a voice in your local government. It's not out of reach.
Shouldn't we
So
be doing the work and presenting to them the data and the evidence to back up our claims and our assertions of what we want to, like what changes we want to make? Because I feel like they're spread thin. They don't have the time to satisfy everyone's wishes. So if people created organizations where they work to prepare diligence materials on certain policies and legislations and actually did the work and cited sources, like reliable sources, like, and presented it to them, they'd be more likely to like listen to you, you know?
right. And imagine that those community groups you're putting together are also the pool of candidates, so that you know when you're electing these people in there, that you know what they know, what the community feels is important. Like there's this divide between the quote unquote political world and the real world. You have people who strive to be politicians, and your state legislators, they just want to be congressmen and senators at the federal level. You know, they're lost in a world of politics. They weren't put in there by the communities saying, hey, we're going to create a pool of within our community of people that will become our state legislators, that will become our county commissioners, and they're going to be well aware and tapped into and held accountable by this group that we are all, we'll call it the concerned citizens group, right? Like we care. We, you know, whether it's we want the minimum wage to be this, or we don't want there to be any limitations on the minimum wage, or we want people to have these gun rights, or we don't want them. But that has to come from the community and start with your county commissioners, your county judges, your county sheriff, and move into the state as well, because that's where all the power is.
I mean,
Your
that's why
state legislature can nullify everything that Biden is putting out.
I mean, that's why special interests are always first in line, right? Because they present like compelling evidence and data for their own interests, right? Like we need to in order to compete with special interests, like we have to do the same.
Well, and it goes beyond that, and this is another, what I feel, another change we need to make to the constitutional republic is because it's not that their information is so compelling, it's that they're lining the pockets of politicians. And we should make that.
But they're professional, you know, like they present themselves a certain way.
Right, they do, but we should have it a part of our county government, state government, and federal government that if you receive any funds whatsoever in any way, shape, or form, directly or indirectly from a special interest group, a lobbyist, or anything else, that's life in prison. Okay? And what's going to start to happen, what's going to start to happen is people, you got to remember, psychopaths actually gravitate to places of power. So how do you keep psychopaths out of your government? Take away their power. And then people who truly want to serve their communities will end up in these positions. But they get all their power from these special interest groups, from these lobbyists, from their buddies who, you know, are running their construction firms and they're side dealing and construction contracts with government funds and shit
Wall
like
Street.
that.
Wall Street.
Yeah. So you got to, like, again, we change it at the ground roots level, like life in prison. Life in prison if you in any way directly or indirectly benefit from any law you put forth or any choices or decisions you make on behalf of the county, the state, the federal government, whatever.
I think if anybody stops at making changes without an ultimate change, or the goal ultimately being of eliminating the federal bureaucracy altogether, then you might have some reductions in oppression or tyranny over a period of time, but it's just going to be a pendulum and it's going to come right back again. So it has to be acknowledged that that's a short-sighted vision. Incremental gains are always a positive thing, of course, but the ultimate goal should not be for all of us to go around espousing changes to the republic. The republic needs to go away. You know, that's not helpful or useful in any way whatsoever. And
I disagree,
When you
because
replace it with
the constitutional republic is basically grounded in principles, and the people have the power. I don't think there is a better form of government if we're going to have a government. I definitely don't agree that as a culture we're at a place where we can have no government. We would just be taken over by the Chinese. So
why is that? Why is that? Chinese has 1.4 million people in their military, and we have a nation of 340 million inhabitants with plenty of might and power and resistance and everything else. Why do people have to jump to that and assume that China is going to roll over us?
Deconstruct it. Not if you deconstruct the republic.
So
and break everything down to a local level. There's no cooperation.
So how did the Americans win the Revolutionary War against the greatest empire on the face of the earth at the time? How did that happen?
They united.
They united. That's right. You could still unite without having a central government. So when the United States was formed under the Articles of Confederation, there was not a central government. There was not. You don't need to have a central government.
The weapons of war were not the same in 1776 as they are today.
That's right. And so if China's going to send a ballistic missile over here, they're going to send a ballistic missile over here, regardless.
Well, what does China have to do with you not wanting a republic?
No, the point here.
Well, the point is the privatizing police forces and military, right? Isn't that your point, Josh?
Well, I think that's a way of ensuring those protective measures if that's what the public wants. My point here is this: you're not gonna correct the system by just perpetuating the system.
But you have to replace it with something.
You don't have to replace it with the same thing.
Your supposition here is that we're operating a constitutional republic, and we are not.
No,
this is not operating like a constitutional republic.
I'm not saying that.
We don't have a free market. In reality, yes, changing this to a true constitutional republic with a free market, I would agree with you. Privatizing police is the way to go because there's competition. That's how you get the best results, is by privatization. I do believe in that, but that's not what we have, and really what you're talking about is a constitutional republic.
No, it's not.
Because it is, absolutely. Remember, there were
I'm talking
departments of the government when it was created.
But you don't
a small thing meant to administer. That's it.
I do.
You're not offering an alternative, though. All right, well, articulate what is your alternative?
Okay, so the alternative is you do not have to have the central state that exists in a manner that is superior to the several states. It doesn't have to exist at all. Just like these people were conned into going into the Constitutional Convention in order to amend the Articles of Confederation, if we simply went back to that and went back and amended the Articles of Confederation with the form of government that existed at that time, it would be exponentially better than it is today. Okay? And that was not a constitutional republic.
But you're making the assumption that it will be better without any sort of track record of having it been implemented.
No,
right?
I'm not. I'm saying that what is clear to me is that it's absurd. It is absolutely irrational to think that the people who created this and the intentions and everything that I'm hearing espoused right now, they couldn't keep it that way when the population was a small, minuscule fraction of what it is today. But somehow people think that we're going to make it be that way with 340 million people.
What does population size have to do with it?
Because you have a central government, you have 600 or so elected officials, elected representatives at the federal level who are overseeing and so-called representatives of over 600,000 people each. Okay, it is disproportionate. There is zero accountability. There is zero responsibility. All the things that we just talked about a minute ago.
So
you want to increase the size of government? No, heck no. I'm saying get rid of the federal government and bring it down to a smaller level that is manageable, that is accountable, that you can actually have true representation, like already exists, in fact, within the
how is
states
the
and counties.
how is the ratio of representatives to the population going to change under that model?
You eliminate the federal bureaucracy. They are no more.
But your point was that they're spread too thin.
Level.
Your point was that they're spread too thin. So how is the ratio going to change under the model?
Do you want me to answer it or not?
Yeah, no,
okay, because you're not hearing what I'm saying at all, dude. I'm telling you, you get rid of the federal representation because you don't need it. You handle things locally.
I totally get what you're saying. I'm saying
so you're represented locally, right?
Okay.
So that ratio is lower when it's smaller, right? Like you have your local county representatives, your local city representatives, whatever. That's a lot more. You can hold those people accountable.
Have you calculated the ratios?
Are you kidding me?
You already have all those things. You already have all those things. And again, in a constitutional republic, the county has more influence and power in your personal life than any other form of government. That is already what a constitutional republic is. The fact that they have the federal government, which again, originally was never meant to be what it is now. It was never meant to have, 500 different departments and a bureaucracy that spans millions of people. Forget about the 600 people in Congress. Look at the millions of people that are employed by the bureaucracy of the federal government. That is not a constitutional republic by
yes, I know.
So
I know.
Again, when people realize, when we realize that it is, when the top down is people, county, state, then federal government, and we start to push our influence first at the local level, you can transform the entire system. Now,
if you do
it's
that,
not a.
Can I ask you something? Because you're going too fast, okay? If you do that from the local level, starting with the individual, which I agree with, by the way, why do you have to keep on going to the federal system? It's unnecessary. There's no value in that.
There is in the fact that states will not always agree. That's what the federal government was like. Are you familiar with the Rio Grande River?
And so right now you're telling me that the federal government helps make states agree?
But states don't have to agree.
That was the original intent. The original intent was to basically.
Isn't that the beauty of having like 50 states though, is that each state gets to make its own decisions?
Yes, I agree with that. And I don't need a federal government to ensure that. Okay? If I like how things are where I live in South Carolina, I can stay here. If I want to go somewhere that's all kinds of liberal and has all kinds of liberal policies and everything, then I can go there and move there and deal with whatever those things are.
That's a great way to think about it.
Well, I don't need the federal government imposing anything, ever.
Why did you make them a statement, get rid of the republic?
Because it's unnecessary.
Do you know what is your definition of republic?
I'm saying when I'm referring to the republic, I'm referring to what is known how they actually function within government, and that it has always been that way from the day that it was ratified. Original intent and all that means nothing because it's never been that way, ever. Even before 1871 and the incorporation, it has never been that way.
Do you believe in individual sovereignty?
Absolutely.
And isn't that a form of republic?
That's not what I'm referring to.
You still have that with the decentralized model, right? I mean, those things aren't mutually exclusive.
That's right. I'm simply saying, look, so I'm not saying there's no value to a union or mutual defense or interstate commerce and things like that, or sort of a culture of a national identity. But we don't need to be ruling each other from opposite coasts through some bureaucracy called the federal central government. It does not need to exist.
That's not how a constitutional republic operates.
It doesn't operate that way. You're living in it, dude. You can tell me it's not how it's intended to be. That's how it is.
It's not a republic.
A constitutional republic.
But he's saying get rid of the constitutional republic. I think that's his point.
Yeah, I know he's saying that, and I'm saying, and the presupposition is that's what we have, and that's not what we are operating under. It is not a constitutional republic.
I agree.
But
that
he's
we're
saying
not
even if we operate under it, it's not a good system. Like,
it's unnecessary.
I think it's difficult to say that, but I agree with him that it's a better model to leave it up to the states.
Yeah, I'm hearing the same thing.
That is the model. That is the model we operate under. It is up to the states. And the union, the federal government, is to avoid having Mexico New Mexico go to war with Texas over water in the Rio Grande. That's the purpose.
Okay.
And that would happen.
What you're saying, though, is what it says on paper, not how it actually has transpired and what we live under. The despotism that we live under is a fact. It's not just something in writing. It's a freaking
look at
fact.
the cause. Look at the cause. You've had a central banking system that took over in 1791.
Okay.
We didn't
by one of the founders who
years.
wrote the system. By one of the founders.
No, he didn't write
the system.
Shit.
He was involved in the process. He was heavily involved and influential in the process. I've got. That's fine. That was he's one of the key players in the Federalist, dude. You can't ignore it. It's a fact. Like, it's fine. I agree with you, what you're saying. I'm not even disagreeing with you. I'm just saying it's like you want to go back to something that never was. It never was. So good luck with that, because now it's not only 5 million people, it's hundreds of millions of people.
Neither of you are thinking illogically. It's just that we don't have any basis to compare it to because it never existed.
But we do have the history of failure for that to ever have been contained within the intent that it was constructed as. The fact that the central government is overbearing and tyrannical. That's the failure.
Are you going to tell me life?
Assuming we install a constitutional republic in the context that Brandon is proposing, how do you maintain it, and what controls do you put in place to make sure it doesn't end in where we are now?
And I'm saying you can't.
The seed of corruption will always find its way into the man. The seed of corruption will always find a way into a central. It's just inevitable. You can't go back in the totality of the human species and find a groupthink or a power structure that has ever been not tainted by corruption, ever.
All right, hold on.
Ryan, we're not designed by the totality.
Yeah, the absolute power lies in the individual. It's about sovereignty without subject. It's about absolute responsibility for everything that's in your life. Before we talk about the county, before we talk about the state, before we talk about the feds, we have to talk about ourselves. We have to look in the mirror. We have to see that everything that comes to us and everything that's a reflection of us is from within. The people in your life are attracted to you because of who you are and what you do and how you think. And if you can't clean your own bedroom, you can't, change the world. So you got to be able to get your own house in order. You got to be the sovereign of your own environment. You can be sovereign of your own life. You can be a sovereign of your own family. You got to be absolutely responsible for everything that comes in your life. 100%. Then we can have a constitutional republic.
Absolutely.
But until you do it in the self, it doesn't matter. We're in the state of New Hampshire, and we're trying to put together a committee of safety to, stop the legislature from making unconstitutional laws. It's a great idea, but I'm in this hall with, 50 really interesting, wonderful people who are excited about, participating in creating a better government. But if we're all just completely ignorant and we don't even know the basis of logic and the law, how is it going to happen? How are we going to do a better job than what's going on right now? And to say that the world we live in is a failure is crazy. I go to the grocery store every day. I might be the only guy who doesn't wear a face mask, but there's nobody beating me up for not wearing a face mask. There's the Karens and the Kens who complain, but they're not physically coming up and stabbing me. No one's pulling a gun to my face.
That's not because of government protection.
Well, I've been arrested multiple times, 50 times, but, as soon as I'm in front of a judge, I go home. This is a pretty well. It has to do with the fact. What does that have to
do with the success or failure of the government as it was intended?
Well, the point is,
you're saying it's been successful.
Really? Yes, I'm saying successful. I have children. They live. there's nobody like killing them. I'm not saying that things can't be better. I'm not saying that I'm aiming for things to be better. But you go to the grocery store, the thing's full of food. You go to the gas station, your gas tank gets full. The world's a better place than it was. We're
And it's
going
not it's
Well,
not because of the government, though. The government didn't contribute any of that.
I'm talking about starting with yourself. All I'm
No, I
saying
agree
is,
with
if we're going to
that.
sit here, if we're going to complain and say
No,
the world's a
So
terrible place,
I didn't
and we're
say the
living,
world. I said the
okay,
government failed. I said the
okay,
government
but
failed.
there's
The
a word.
constitutional
let
government
me
failed,
clarify
not
something.
the world.
So the reason why we're not agreeing, or we have different opinions on this, is because we don't know how pure the constitutional republic was when it was originally formed, and how it was corrupted exactly, because we don't have the data, we don't have the information. The information has been compromised. That's why it's important to document everything throughout history, and make sure and audit it and verify it, and pass it along to the next generation, because that's why we're in this position now. We don't have a perfect solution, because we don't have all the data from the past to make an informed decision about the future and what to do.
There
Harry,
is
I
a
think,
lot of information.
yeah. I think the thing is the way that you
it's
Harry,
presented
hold
a
on.
different
Harry, hold
way.
on. Can I jump in here? It's the fact of sabotaging ourselves with the language, right? So when we say there is no data, there is nothing, they have taken and stripped it away, that leaves us to a place where there's no alternative. So the fact of the matter is there is data out there. We
I'm
just
not
have
saying
to
there isn't data. I'm just saying that
Right.
it's been compromised.
Well,
Not,
if you stop, hold on one second. So if you listen, when our narratives and our perspectives are being challenged, and that's what's happened. That's what I see. I see the perspective of what we agree to, our agreements of our perspectives are being challenged, and this is healthy for all of us. There's a lot of bright minds in here, and so what's happening is we're at a threshold where we have to push through the uncomfortable conversation of challenging the narrative. So what Josh is presenting, what Brazen is presenting, what we all know, our commitments and our convictions as being patriots to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, we're at that precipice. We are definitely all searching for the same exact thing, and that's truth. And like right now, we're in what I would call an Operation Protect and Preserve. I mean, we are trying to preserve the history as we see it. I mean, and it's changing right here before our own eyes in modern times. So what's happening right here is this is a beautiful conversation. I enjoy it. I appreciate it. But there definitely is data and information out there. And if you listen to this conversation, it's being presented right now. And what we have to do is we have to subside and we have to observe. I would say that Josh's perspective is a perspective that is definitely challenging the narrative of what we all would agree is where we're heading as far as the Republic versus the incorporated America.
If you have undoctored data, accurate data, you can make an informed decision. I'm just saying that we don't have all the data we need to make like the decision that's being presented to us. And dude, most of that is because everything is fucking doctored, bro. Everything is manipulated and presented. It's been happening throughout time. And we see it now coming to fruition because of Trump and the way that he challenged the narrative and the data, and it's all being exposed. But like there has to be a solution. We have to put controls in place and regulations in place that if the public asks for access to data, for example, internal data from the Secretary of State's office in Georgia, and he refuses to release the data, how are we ever going to have an answer, right? There needs to be transparency.
So my response to that would be what you're looking at is a very, and I'm not saying this in a disrespectful way, but it's a very shallow, relevant issue. Because that's who we are. That's our existence. It's challenging our very perspective that binds us to who we are and our identity. We are going to find ways to look at the forensics of what's happening right now in current modern times. However, the fact of the matter is the deception starts long before the actual relevant, shallow issues that we are going through now. So if we're going to sit here and battle the branches, what we're proposing in this conversation that I'm hearing is that there's a deeper root problem that goes it supersedes.
Yeah, but how do you stop the bleeding, bro? Like you have to be able to present evidence.
It's true. And it's exactly what you were saying. There is no evidence to show. It's all tainted. It's all skewed. Well, we have to be able to get the bright minds. I would say this group would be like a group of of people that are like, modern day folk heroes, because the information that's being shared right now is something that's challenging the narrative.
Can I agree with something Harry said that would allow us to move forward where we want to go? And that was the Citizen 7.
Go for it, man.
The idea of transparency is, I can't say enough. I mean, absolutely. I mean, how are we going to be able to have rules to a game if people don't know the rules to the game? We're speaking conceptually about, how we'd like to see things work. But without this idea of transparency, how can we all get on the same page? And I'm not saying we're going to get 100% of people on the same page, but at least enough people on the same page where we're moving forward on a better tier where we're going today.
Can I respond to that?
Theater. Everything is theater without the data, dude. It's all political theater without hard evidence and accuracy.
Well, there is evidence, and that's what Josh is presenting. And listen, I'm just going to come from a testimonial place. Josh has challenged my narrative, okay? And so he has a massive amount of data. See, what's better than science is new science. What's better than history that as we have been presented, new history.
But can you transcend and include? Could you take this idea of Brazen and take this idea of Josh and take the positives from both and combine them?
Yeah,
This versus a democracy versus republic. Each one of them has wonderful aspects where maybe we'll say this. Well, exactly, and where it comes to the individual, where for me, and I can only speak from my perspective, I look at the republic as this is the real things. Then I look at the democracy as, this is the world of limited liability. I could start a business, I can make mistakes, I can have insurance, I can go bankrupt, I can lose everything and start all over. But, if I'm in the republic and I cut my leg off, I'm not getting a new leg. They're both important.
We are definitely in a world of contradiction. And I think the minds here are literally colliding so that we may come to an understanding of what truth is. I think truth will bind us, but the thing is we have to get through the deception, and it starts long ago, once upon a time. Unfortunately, we have to start there.
When I got into this discussion earlier, and y'all were talking, I think Branson, is it Branson? And I agreed to this whole idea of eliminating contradictions, and I think that's again these are if that's a universal truth. In the pursuit of truth, rather, if that's a virtuous goal in the pursuit of truth, then that's all I'm talking about is, let's remove the sacred cows, let's have the discussions, and let's not get hung up on because we don't have evidence of the future, we must cling to the past. That's
okay,
just
let me offer something that I believe brings all of our points together. I don't think there's any doubt that from the beginning that the corruption of a constitutional republic where the people are the authority and responsible was a central banking system. And
I agree.
When you give control of currency to anyone, to any group, to any individual, it leads to the absolute corruption of that government because they print the money. So they can pad anyone's pockets that they want, and they can influence every aspect of your culture and society to steer the society towards their own personal gains and ends. We now live in a time where we have technology available that could eliminate a central banking system and would eliminate anyone having control over our currency. So I know it seems unrelated, but there's a reason why I've been a voice of cryptocurrencies for so many years. I was telling everyone in 2011 to get Bitcoin, which they would have made a lot of money had they done. But it's a decentralized currency. You have no power or control over it. And that could, by implementing a decentralized currency system and completely eliminating really not just the central banks, it would eliminate the banking systems as a whole.
Yeah.
I'm
Are
talking
you
about
suggesting
from
that they're
Wells
not
Fargo to the Federal Reserve. They would all be eliminated.
Are you
And that would,
suggesting they're not taxing people for their capital gains and everything right now in cryptocurrency?
Well,
who's taxing people? You, I mean, like,
another perspective
Yeah, but
on the
capital.
cryptocurrency is the fact that as we know, the central banking systems can print as much money as they want. Correct? What's to
yes.
say that they're not the whales coming in swooping in all the Bitcoin, and
They are.
what's to say that they're also not extracting the sweat equity from the Western society because everybody's jumping in and mortgaging their houses and jumping into Bitcoin. With the uncertainties of the future with technologies moving into the immersed augmented realities and going to these technologies, I question it because Ryan was saying, being an individual and stepping off the merry-go-round and just being accountable, right, with our ones and twos, planting in the dirt, getting out there working, creating your own ecosystem, creating your own economics. Just being able to have proof of work, your own sweat equity still in your pocket, in your safe, whatever your goods may be. I have when it comes to the cryptocurrency. Now I'm not saying I'm not against it. I'm just keeping in perspective that because it's decentralized and it's kind of the wild west still, so to speak, that I see it as a potential extraction of the Western wealth. Because we don't know who these players are internationally that are creating some of these movements with the cryptocurrency. Now, I have crypto, but I just wanted to say that.
Are you saying that for
Right.
Bitcoin, or are you saying that for all cryptos? You're saying that some of the cryptos you're concerned about, which seems to be a legitimate concern.
Yeah. I just say, with it still being, in the position that it is, it seems as if there's a lot of people that are gravitating to it, and there is a shifting coming without a doubt.
I can say I'm one of those people who knew Brandon back in, I think, 2012, and he was telling us about crypto, and I understood where he was coming from immediately. And,
crypto as we know it now, definitely there's a lot of benefits, and there's a lot of, there's a lot of capitalizing off of it.
I meant, forgive me, he was telling us Bitcoin at the time, which was the one in play. Right. Before things became more complex with crypto technology all around.
There's also risk. I have some crypto invested, and the service or whatever you call it, the exchange that I use suddenly just said, hey, your account is restricted for now. And that was a month and a half ago. And I can go and trade back and forth between the different things, but I can't.
Knock before you come in my room.
What?
I didn't hear you. All right, I'll take it down.
Harry, you're not muted.
I had something to kind of, some of the earlier, a lot of times, like, because I'm thinking of this whole thing, we're talking about the history, we're talking about the original republic that to all of us is kind of like it's in our imagination, really, because I think all of us are kind of seeing, we never really experienced it in our lifetime. So we're all imagining what that even looks like. We're imagining the characters. We have our history. Oops, excuse me.
Sorry, the people I live with.
But so something, a lot of times I'll have to go to a metaphor for me to try to understand what's going on. And I'm hearing this thing with the ship of state, right? The ship. And if something, there's all these parts, and as I'm seeing it, like, we have the republic like a ship, but then you have the captains that are steering the ship. And, if something goes wrong, you got to kind of look at, well, was it something wrong with the ship, or was it just the people who were steering it? What's fueling it? Is it the wind? Is it just a storm that nobody could have prepared for? Or what is it? And in the end, it's probably a combination of all this stuff. We've brought up, people have kind of, there's human fallibility, or whatever we want to call it. You give someone a bunch of power and it corrupts absolutely, and so on and so on. But in the end, right now, it's like, if this ship that we're all kind of together on, and we're sort of looking at, maybe we're all making little lifeboats and just trying to get off of whatever this train, train is or ship is that is going in this crazy direction. And it just looks like we're taking on water. Everything's kind of losing its grip on reality, like what we think, like ways we were raised, where it's like you can work hard, you can have community, you can have good relationships. Suddenly, you can't even go out in public without hiding your face. Like things are going nuts. And so I'm not saying I just like to bring in these metaphorical ways of sort of developing this understanding, because I really think it's a combination of all of it. I think that the power of us understanding our history and somehow salvaging, because I guess again I'm using the maritime language, this amazing creation that somehow got us this far, like running on fumes. I mean, that's so. I tend to agree with Ryan that even with how much corruption is embedded and has been like my whole lifetime, somehow we're here, and most of that is based on the hard work of all our ancestors and communities of so many years. But anyway, I really do just have this respect for it, but also I do see this need that, and I thank you, Josh, for just getting us into the state of like, well, we don't owe it the sacred cow status or whatever. So anyway, thanks everyone for the viewpoints, and I hope my metaphor kind of has some weight.
Absolutely. So, and let me bring it back around with, where we started in discernment, right? And deconstructing ideology. So first thing I would invite any of you to do with regards to your conversation around a decentralized currency system, and it is far superior than a centralized one, but the way I hear y'all speaking about it is you're speaking about it as if it's a security that you purchase with your Federal Reserve notes and that you earn more Federal Reserve notes with it. If you look at it as a currency, meaning no more Federal Reserve notes, and it is a currency, it cannot be manipulated as easily as they've been manipulating currencies that they have absolute control over for hundreds of years now. So yes, can they buy a lot of it? But yeah, it's not a security. So at some point, they got to spend it if it's our currency. So, and even the whales now, a lot of them did buy in. A lot of the banks bought in years ago. But here's the thing. If they sell, who buys it up? We do. And so they're caught between a rock and a hard place. Like, yeah, we could dump it and offset the price for temporarily, the value of it temporarily, but the value of a currency is based on its demand. And if it is the currency that we buy and sell and trade everything with, and it is a currency and not a security, because that's how people are looking at it, that's how people are treating it, it is not a security, it is a currency. And when you start to see that, like I've seen the value of all the Bitcoins I've bought increase thousands of times their value over time. And I've never seen that with the dollar. The dollar has only lost value in my entire lifetime. It has never gained value. And this is because a true currency, its value will always be determined by its demand. And when it becomes the medium of exchange in everything we do, its demand gets higher and higher and higher over time. And because the quantity is set and will not go beyond a certain point, it is guaranteed to gain value over time, which means that your savings, if you want to call it that, will always be increasing in value, as opposed to your dollar Federal Reserve note savings that will always lose value over time. So with more people coming into the world, with more financial transactions in our future, demand on currency will always be increasing because there will always be a demand to engage in commerce. So That's one of the, again, look at it as a currency and realize, understand that even the dollar, its value is based on the demand. The problem is that the Federal Reserve can just print it up and create digital numbers in banks' accounts that have no basis in anything, and they can inflate that quantity ad infinitum. They can continuously increase, pump it, which means over time it will lose more value. And that's the clear distinction I wanted to make here is looking at it as a currency and realizing that when it's set in number and that its value is based on demand, just like the dollar. In fact, the demand for our dollar is why we fight wars for oil, because we want people to trade in dollar. It increases the demand for the dollar, which thereby increases the value. But when you just keep on printing it, it will always lose value over time. So we really, if you look at why do we fight wars? To increase the value of the dollar, to increase the demand on the dollar. When we took over control of Iraq, why did we do that? Because we wanted them to trade their oil in dollars. Plain and simple. And that's how we increase the demand for US dollars, which because they print it just indiscriminately, it will always lose value. So again, I wanted to make that distinction. Again, we began this conversation with making discernment, making distinctions, and being able to get at the truth of something and take that into consideration when you look at cryptocurrencies. And yes, not all of them are created equal. I would stay the hell away from Ethereum. I would stay the hell away from Ripple and the XRMs. These are centralized. These are not true cryptocurrencies. And I notice that there's a lot of hype around those in this community because who's going to control it? If they got everyone to adopt like XRM, right? And Ripple's cryptocurrency, then they can control it. If they could get everyone to buy into Ethereum, well, then they can control it.
And that's the opposite. That's the opposite.
Let me bring that back real quick to responsibility, Brandon, because in using or acquiring or engaging with cryptocurrency at all, you've got to take it on in personal responsibility. Because if you don't, like Josh was saying, there's a high level of risk in leaving it on somebody else's server or having somebody else trade it or store it or protect it for you. So if you don't take full responsibility and if you don't act responsibly, you're going to be operating with a high level of risk. I know people that have hundreds, if not thousands of Bitcoin on a laptop somewhere in a dumpster that they threw away years ago. And they're shooting themselves in the foot right now because they didn't act responsibly in relationship with it. Had they, they'd be sitting pretty today with millions of dollars in Bitcoin. Or as to say, with value to that.
Just to clarify, I invested like $250 just to test this stuff out and put it out there. And 1 week later, I get a notice saying your account is restricted and we're busy right now, but we'll get to you as soon as we can. There's no way of communicating with anybody. There's no responses to anything. So I know your statement was general, but I just want to clarify. I haven't even done anything but just put in some money and see how does all of this work. And then the next thing you know, I can't do anything with it. So I'm not.
They're going through an intermediary.
There has been
intermediary.
One of the largest.
If you create your wallet and you use the Bitcoin infrastructure, the open source infrastructure that's there, and you just use it as a currency, like, oh, here's my Bitcoin address, send me the payment, and I'll do that job for you. You don't have the issue of dealing with these intermediaries who are acting as middlemen in the purchasing and selling of them. And I get it.
Get money into the wallet. You have to get money into the wallet, and that's exactly what I was doing. I was transferring it into a wallet, and now it says restricted.
Yeah, and there is, again, there are ways, like I said, if you start dealing in business that way.
Wait. Were you saying
I take Bitcoin?
Josh, were you saying that your wallet was restricted, or the platform
No,
you were buying from was restricted?
no, I bought from Uphold. Okay.
Yeah,
And at one
because
point, I was transferring what I had in Uphold to Atomic, and it just said the transaction was unsuccessful and your account's under review, and that's a month and a half ago.
yeah, I mean, so one of the largest heists in U.S. history, at least, was the Mount Gox heist, where they lost I don't know how many millions of Bitcoin in
Yeah, and it was
one
definitely an
heist,
inside job. I
and
bought in the first minute. It was hackers, quote unquote.
yeah, we got hacked, quote unquote, hacked. Whether it was an inside job or an outside job, the fact remains a obscene amount of Bitcoin was stolen from people. At hundreds of dollars per Bitcoin, it was still what, like $250 million worth of Bitcoin at the time, and that would be, exponentially uh, compounded at this point.
Where I'm a little
But
miffed though.
my
Can I ask
point in
can
the
I ask
whole thing is, yeah, my last point here, the whole reason I'm bringing this up is because if you get your cryptocurrency, no matter what it is, and you're able to control it, keep it offline, and be responsible with it, it's an enormous asset. But if you put the responsibility of safekeeping in some other company's hand, or the responsibility of purchasing it in another company's hand, any responsibility along the purchase or I'll say the acquisition or the storage or the expenditure of it, any part of that entire process in somebody else's hands, you're running a huge risk, because the majority of these cryptos are extremely difficult to track if they're even able to be tracked.
So what would the suggestion have been in this case where I had to buy into the system somehow? So that's how I did it, off of other people's recommendations and a little bit of research. And again, for me, this was like going to the arcade and spending a few bucks just for some entertainment, because I don't have a high degree of confidence in crypto anything. And this just really solidified that for me. I didn't do anything irresponsible. I bought into the system as I was told is the way to do it. I had to prove my identity and all this for tax purposes, which just really thrills me, by the way. And,
You know,
you know,
I would say Coinbase was caught manipulating selling and buying when the crash was happening last year. You guys can look up the articles on it. So Coinbase itself, the exchange. So the exchanges are doing this. What they'll do is they'll just decline your order. So that's how they manipulate this market right now. They can still do that, obviously.
Well, right now my money's tied up. I can't do anything because Uphold doesn't respond worth of beans. It's totally like there's no building I can go to. There's no person I can call. There's no chat that I can have with somebody to inquire about it. I get automated responses. Just hear me out. I get automated responses saying, we'll get back to you when we can. It's usually fast, they say, but then they don't do it. Whereas if it was my bank, I could go to the bank and walk in there and say, hey, what's going on with my account? So this crypto stuff is just basically left me high and dry right now, hoping that I get a response to some messages someday.
Right. And like I said, I got in early, many years ago, when there was no regulation whatsoever. There's ways around it, because you could just set up a VPN and go through some foreign exchange somewhere and not have to deal with what you're dealing with now. However, I would say a great entry point. I don't know what your status is in the workforce, but see, I've always been independent. So if somebody wants me to do work for them, I could say, yeah, I take Bitcoin. Here's my Bitcoin address. Well, how do I do it? Just get the Cash App. You get the Cash App, it'll hook to your bank account, and you can send me Bitcoins directly. And that's a way to start building up your Bitcoin holdings, is to start contracting with them. Use it like a currency. Don't look at it as a security, like, oh, I want to own shares in stock. No. It's a currency.
Before I do that, I have to trust the system, and right now I don't at all.
Trust a friend. You can easily find somebody on this chat or somewhere else that you can trust, a friend even, that would be willing to make a transaction with you. If you know somebody who's recommending Uphold, which I've never really even heard of, and I've been in this game a while, I would say, oh, if you're really recommending Uphold, why don't you just sell me $100 worth of Bitcoin? whatever the going rate is today, I'll pay you that. Keep $5 for yourself or something. That's the easiest, fastest way to get into it. Set yourself up a wallet and have a friend send you something.
I have a wallet. Okay,
I have a
so
couple
but when I go
easy
and
questions.
I'm not going to have my
Citizen will sell it to
payroll.
you.
My payroll's not being deducted, or excuse me, my payroll from my employer is not going into some crypto wallet. And either way, back to the whole thing that Brandon was talking about with the banking system and everything, there's still withholdings. There's still all of these things. The government isn't changing anything just because some people are going into cryptocurrency and somehow avoiding taxes or whatever, you know. So that's not going to bring down the federal Leviathan.
I
And
agree
even,
that
No.
I agree that customer like experiences and shit like, you know, builds trust of a particular system, but with Bitcoin there's a finite supply, so they don't have any incentive to retain, like to have recurring revenue or retain customers, because if they can just siphon off, you know, everyone's Bitcoin, like they'll have the most supply of it in it, you know what I'm saying?
Can I ask a pretty simple question here? And this is just off the top of my mind. What do you guys think the biggest weapon formed against us is? Would you guys think that it's people power, technology? Do you think that with moving and projecting into the future with technology, and I personally believe that technology is the biggest weapon formed against us. So once we start agreeing to putting all of our sweat equity into this technology infrastructure,
Did you just ask the question, give us the answer, and then go into the discussion?
pretty much.
Okay, cool. All right, keep
I'm
going.
glad-
It's
I'm
fine. I
glad
just
you
want to
picked up
double
on that.
check.
So I'm just getting it all out of the way, and then I'll just go back into the shadows. So to me, I feel, and I don't know about you guys, but it's hard for me to put my faith into a system that I'm already side-eyeing. You know, like I don't feel as if the technology is going to favor us in the future. You know, it's if all of my assets are tangled up into an infrastructure that is an invisible infrastructure, a power grid, a server, network system. I know we can pull it out in wallets and we can store it away, but do you guys feel like in the future that they will have more control over us if they centralize the cryptocurrency world? And I'm just asking because I really don't have a lot, and I may invest more into it, but I have some fears because I feel like I'm walking away from technology because I feel like it's a weapon, and I don't want to get tangled up in the snares of the future infrastructure.
Yeah,
I would
goes
say
both ways.
first and foremost, ahead of technology, as far as what's being weaponized against us, is number one, the banking system, the system of mediums of exchange and controlling that. Second, I would say is media. That is what's poisoning the world. It's poisoning the way they think. It's poisoning the information that they believe to be true. It is an absolute system of not only corruption of governments and of our culture, but it is absolutely working to undermine and devolve and collapse our culture and our societies. So I would say those two are ahead, but technology is definitely up there because that's what they're using. In fact, media, it comes to you through some form of technology, whether it's a television, whether it's your cable lines, whether it's YouTube. So these are all quote unquote technologies. And when you start to look at how they even use technology to sterilize the population and things like that, like yes, technology is definitely an issue, but it's more of a medium. You know, what you have to look at is there are groups of people who want to control the planet, okay? And they want to control the planet through the only reason they can control the planet is because they control the currency systems, the monetary systems, and so they can manipulate and influence media, and they can manipulate and influence politicians. But it's really the threat, the danger is having control over the levers of our society in the hands of very few who have really the capacity and ability to have unlimited influence over every aspect, over every institution, over every facet of our culture.
Do you think, what's the percentage that you would think that are people actually engaging with the cryptocurrency community currently?
The percentage of the population?
Yeah, do you think it's like 10% of people that are actually invested into the cryptocurrency? I mean, is it like, do you guys know if it's a big percentage, or is it still super small?
I would say that there's a lot of
Super
people
small.
who look at it as a security, and so they look at it like they're investing in stock and they buy and sell it and stupid shit like that. And I'd say that there's a much larger percentage of that than people who actually see it and treat it like a currency. So as far as usage, like how many people use it as a medium of exchange, I would say much less than 1%. And then, maybe 10% when you consider that like a lot of these, 401ks and hedge funds and stuff, they all have holdings in Bitcoins as well. So if you're indirectly, I would say it's influencing the retirement funds and things of at least 10% of the population.
And then do you guys think that the future of the way that the government may play a role in centralizing it, or like somehow controlling the narrative in the future? Do you think that that's a heavy possibility, or do you think that'll just stay decentralized?
It can't. Yeah, as far as true cryptocurrencies, you can't decentralize them. Now that you can't centralize them. They're putting into place their own quote unquote cryptocurrencies, right? They're going to have the digital dollar, and the Chinese have the digital yuan, and like I said, there's
that's what Ripple is.
Yeah, and that's the Ripple and the other one, Ethereum. These are centrally controlled. So not all digital currencies are cryptocurrencies. A cryptocurrency is a truly decentralized system and cannot be centralized. It just can't be. It's the nature of the technology itself. And so
in that light, the Federal Reserve, or not the Federal Reserve, but the U.S. government couldn't even use it because they don't own it and control it. It's outside of their jurisdiction, so they can't adopt it, so to speak. They've got to
So
use
how much cryptocurrency does the government own?
I have no idea. It's an open source technology. So you could go on the blockchain and look and see which wallets. You can't know who owns the wallet, but you can see which wallets own how much of it.
Total population usage right now is 8% in America. Majority of them are millennials. I just looked up this article and posted it in the chat if you guys want to check it out. Pretty interesting. I mean, as far as total goes, that's higher than I thought, and Branson was pretty close with his 10% guess there. And yeah, it's a pretty good topic, guys. You guys are on fire.
One of the other things I wanted to bring up about this to address, I forget whose question it was earlier, but talking about if this is a tool to bring down the corporate U.S. or maybe transition from the corrupt state that we've got now into whatever is next. I don't think this is really that. It's not a way to tear down or rebuild any type of government structures, at least in the ways that I see it. But it does exist as a parallel, something that we've talked about in this group before, something that exists parallel that serves as a option or an alternative to a current system. So right now you could choose to spend Bitcoin on paying, some contractor instead of using dollars. You can start to phase out or replace. And with all the cryptocurrencies out there, it's just a matter of finding out who will accept what crypto. Now, Bitcoin's the biggest one, so it's super easy, but it's also pretty expensive at this point to make transactions with. So it only really makes sense to make large transactions with. But there are a ton of other ones that you could find. And if, say, like the guy who mows your lawn or the guy who, is fixing your roof or whatever, accepts Bitcoin, you could pay him in that just because you put $200 in, a year ago, and now it's worth 1,000, and you owe him $1,000. You're like, cool, here, take this Bitcoin. And that's just a way to start transitioning outside those systems that are heavily controlled and manipulated. So it's not a way to tear down. Again, it's an alternative.
But it seems like a great tool if you want to have individual sovereignty. It seems like it gives you the power in your own hand instead of giving the power to someone else. And that
Absolutely.
is how we could start moving into the idea of having a republic.
Exactly. Because at that point, if everyone tomorrow said to hell with Federal Reserve notes and just stopped using them, and everyone had Bitcoin wallets and transacted all their business through Bitcoin, it would kill the banking system. It would die because it would no longer have the power and control over us, because it can print as much as it wants. If there's zero demand for it, it has zero value. And so they could print billions and trillions and quadrillions of dollars and it'd be worthless to them. And they would have no power over our commercial systems. They would have no power over our personal lives. To me, it is an essential element to bringing to the foreground, to restoring a constitutional republic, is taking that central control of our banking system out of the hands of the few, because that is at the root cause of the destruction of our republic and the usurpation by these foreign powers, by these bad actors who now control every aspect of our society because they had control over our monetary systems. I mean, it all comes back to that. Without taking the control of our monetary system away from them, we have no power, because they can influence every level. They could literally buy up every politician at the county level, at the state level, at every level of government everywhere. They can influence corporations. They can influence the media. So if tomorrow, everyone stopped using the dollar, they would lose all their power.
And the cherry on top is that if they decided to buy up all the Bitcoin in existence with whatever fictional currency they do have, then everybody would be able to see it as it's an open source system and go, we're not going to use this anymore. Look at somebody else, 50% of it. Let's use this other one instead. And we would just transition to a different crypto. That's the power in having a diverse, huge bank of cryptocurrencies out there.
And even if they bought half of it, they still only have the control they used to have. So it's going in the right direction.
Right. And they still have no control because they can't print anymore. They can buy it, but they're going to have to sell it. They're going to have to use it. Again, if there were no dollars, the only way they could buy things would be with cryptocurrency. And so it would have to be spent. You can't just hold on to it. There's no gains in just holding it. Again, you got to look at it as a currency. If that's the currency and that's what we're using as a medium of exchange to buy and sell goods and services, well, then they'd have to spend it, because holding it would give them no power. And let's say their intention is we're going to drop the value by just dumping it all. Fine, dump it all. The fact is, it's still the medium of exchange. So yeah, the value with relationship to the Federal Reserve note may drop, but the supply is set. So the demand will still be there and the value will go right back up because it's being used as a currency. So again, don't look at this as a security that you invest in. Look at it as buying into your future currency and just hold it. Don't trade it. Don't buy and sell it. Don't try to make more Federal Reserve notes on it. Just buy it. Just buy it. Just buy it. Because the supply is limited. And at some point, the cryptocurrencies are the only way out of this. It's the only way to eliminate this level of corruption and control that has taken over every government around the country.
Just want to add, that I do agree with Branson here as far as it being the future, because Bill Gates, as recommended, that average people should not get into cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin, because it's too pricey for us to be playing with. So having said that, also that I do want to point this out though, because I feel like corporations are ahead of us in this game that we're playing, or they're playing with us. And what I mean by that is I've thrown this out there in Davos in 2021. They had a convention in January, right? And basically they're saying that we're going to be switching over from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. What that's going to do is create more bureaucracy, more checks and balances, and more sort of like agencies to make sure that we're not doing certain things, or we're going to have to get permission to do more things. And they're going to point it out as a narrative that as we all need to be more responsible. These companies need to be held responsible, and we're all stakeholders. Customers are stakeholders. So it shouldn't just be the shareholders that are making the ultimate decision, and that's the narrative that's going to be sort of painted going forward. And having said that, just the fact that Elon Musk did buy 1.5 billion at 36,000, it did just in 1 week make their shares increase in price. I'm sorry, in value. So if they bought 1.5 billion, they made 900 million within a week.
Can I invoke the Republic?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'd like to invoke the Republic in the sense that there was this gentleman on the call who was speaking earlier, who was very articulate, and he wanted to spend $250 to get a cryptocurrency. I think all 15 of us on this call owe that gentleman the support to make sure that he gets his ledger and starts controlling his own crypto privately. And I don't know if you gentlemen agree.
I'll donate.
Yeah, I think that's the only way to go. Like another person in our group last week lost a significant amount, over $60,000 worth of Bitcoin, because he was relying on these proprietary wallets and things like that. And I get that there was definitely a barrier, a technology barrier, where people who don't understand it don't know where to go with it. I would say that's why a lot of people came to me years ago to create a trust with Bitcoin, because I understood the technology and I could acquire it and I could put it in a wallet and I could keep it secure. So there is definitely a learning curve. So there's a barrier there, in the fact that if you don't understand it, you can easily become a victim to it, because you don't know what to do and what not to do. Right? You don't know about these platforms that you should be staying away from. And then you don't know any other way of acquiring it without going through these platforms. You don't know what a wallet is. You don't know that the Bitcoin structure itself has a wallet that you can install on your computer. It's an open source system that is secure, especially if you use passphrases, don't keep your wallet online, things like that. The only way you can ever have your Bitcoin stolen is when you don't understand the nature of the wallet and you have an online wallet that you're holding on some platform that, for all you know, they could just move it out like they did at Mt. Gox at any point, and boom, all your Bitcoins are gone, and they could claim, oh, sorry, we got hacked. Because the nature of Bitcoin is that it just ends up in a wallet somewhere and nobody knows who owns that wallet. So all the funds just disappear off of a platform and they're gone. So there is definitely a barrier to understanding it, a barrier to the technology, that I would say start learning how a Bitcoin wallet works, the distinction between an online wallet and an offline wallet, that you could actually not only secure any money coming out of your wallet with a passphrase, but you can also learn encryption technologies and encrypt the wallet file itself, so that it goes an extra step. Because if you can encrypt the file itself, then no one could ever even open the file to see what the balance is in the wallet. The only time I would ever open the wallet is if I'm expecting a payment. I'll open it up, the payment comes in, I shut it down, and I encrypt it and then store it in many different safe places. And it's secure. No one could ever get the file itself. No one could ever get the Bitcoins out of it. So there is that understanding the technology that I feel is extremely important for you to be secure. Because the gentleman that I'm talking about who lost over 60,000 in Bitcoin last week, he's tech savvy. He's no idiot. He's been, in fact, I met him when I ran a media company, and he was one of our artists. He was a graphic designer. He's extremely competent with a computer, but he had a flaw in his Bitcoin holdings in that he was using these proprietary wallets, and somebody just sucked out his Bitcoin.
Hey,
They somehow got his passphrase and just sent it away from his wallet.
I'd like to bring up the point. I think it's Josh who was having trouble. So I think as a group, we should support Josh in getting on board with crypto so we can get a taste of what this Republic idea actually means.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do feel that, again, in restoring the Republic, and, you guys have heard me talk about this for years, that it's not about going up against this corporation. It's about creating an alternative to it, something parallel to it, that when we get a critical mass, enough people operating in the Republic, the corporation will die. It can't live without our attention.
Or it gives us a choice to choose. Do we want to live in the fiction, or do we want to live in a real world?
Absolutely.
At least in our lifetime, right? We'll be able to utilize either resource. Our family we're stepping off the system as we know it. We're going to be traveling and creating our own little ecosystem, off the sideshow. So I'm really happy to have joined your guys' group tonight for the discussion. I look forward to seeing you guys again and having discussions. I really appreciate it. I'm going to sign off. You guys have a great night.
Thanks, Citizen. Come back
you
and
too.
talk some more.
Alrighty. Well, I think that was a great conversation. That's it. I'm out. Peace. Have a great evening, everyone.
Good night, everybody.